Hello and welcome to our weekly IG Live. Today I'm so excited to be talking to Dini Martinez. She has been a member of the MKB for a long time, and we're going to be talking about traveling with kids. And she is someone with a lot of experience in this. She's been traveling the world with her kids for, I think, about 10 years, and I can't wait to talk. She has a lot of tips that she can give us and just her experience with it and how you even make that happen. Because I know a lot of us, it just seems like such a dream, but practically, I'm not sure how it would work. Hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Yourself?
Good, thank you. Well, why don't we start? You can just introduce yourself and tell us where you're joining us from.
Okie doke. I'm Dini Martinez. I'm joining you from a bay in Panama on the Caribbean side. We just came back from San Blas, which is an island archipelago a bit further towards Colombia. And yeah, sitting on my boat, lots of boats around me. I just managed to park all the kids on a friend's boat so we can talk in peace. And yeah, that's me right now.
It looks so beautiful there. And tell us, how did you get started with this? I mean, it seems like such a wonderful idea, but a lot of us think about it and don't actually act on it. So how did you get started traveling? Is that something you did before kids and just decided to continue?
Yeah, I guess I started real early. So when I was 6, I went to spend a year with a French host family. And from there on, it was basically a different country every couple of years between boarding schools and hanging with other families. And so I guess that nomadic grain was always there. And it continued on. And sailing is the other part of the story that I always loved. My grandpa taught me how to sail when I was really little. I worked on the yachts, super yachts for a while, crossing the ocean, doing the Mediterranean and the Caribbean season quite a few times. And so, yeah, it started long before kids. And I think my family, especially my parents, are hoping that once I had kids and got married, like I'd settle down and grow up. And for me, what happened, and even myself, I thought, okay, maybe that'll be the moment I finally be normal. And the opposite really happened, even though I sometimes feel like, oh, it'd be nice to have a backyard and grow my veggies and not have to worry about the storms coming or whatever else is happening. I feel such a responsibility to show them the world with all its beauty where it still is and all its issues where they're coming up, and get them to see that there's not one way of living or thinking or being, because we live in so many different cultures and pop in and out. Sometimes we stay a year in a place, sometimes we just stay a day never happens, but maybe a week. And so for them, to have that broad vision of the world. So yeah, long answer.
Oh, no, that's wonderful. And I imagine if you grew up traveling and going to so many different places, then it was obvious to you, like all the benefits and all the things that you got out of it, like you said, about seeing different ways of living, seeing all the beauty in the world. And it seemed, and that would just seem so natural to want to share that with your kids. How do you decide where you're going to go next, or how long you're going to stay in one place versus going someplace new?
It's a very heartfelt decision. There's not much. I mean, there is sailing when you live on a boat. And I guess if you did it in a camper van, or people are nomadic in different ways, no, there's different boundaries to the freedom you can have. And when sailing, those boundaries are the seasons, no? Like you wouldn't sail around the Caribbean in the middle of hurricane, you call it here, season, or in Australia, on the Australian East Coast during cyclone season. So in that, you kind of limited, if you want to use that word. So we do guide ourselves by nature. And then also in terms of how long we stay in a place, just how it's really a feeling thing. Like sometimes, yeah, we're not feeling it for a year. Sometimes after a few days, it's starting to get itchy and know it's time to move on.
I love that. And I love that, especially sailing, I would imagine, because you do have to pay such close attention to the seasons and the weather. It's a great way. They're not just experiencing different cultures, but they're really having to be in tune with the natural world and pay attention to what's happening around them in nature.
Totally, which is something we take so much for granted. And whenever I meet people living in the city, I realize how rare it actually is. Like little things like the moon cycle. Like
Mm.
my own cycle obviously goes with the moon, but generally just being totally aware of that, being totally aware of what the weather is doing around us. That is so, it's the first thing I check every morning. And it's the first, like my kids, silly, simple example, the boys go out for a wee, they'll check where the wind comes from because they know otherwise they have it in their face. Like, and yeah, we take it for granted. And there is also the other side of the story, you know, because I know it sounds beautiful and there is many beautiful things to it. And at the same time, like you said at the very beginning of this conversation, many people dream of having a different life or a nomadic life or a sailing or whatever, like, uh, and very few do it. And it's okay that not everyone does it because it's really not for everyone. Like the other side of that, living completely in tune with nature, is giving up a lot of comfort.
Mm.
Like sometimes we'd be stuck on the boat for days on end because the wind is simply so strong you cannot get off. Kids want to play date, maybe no other kids' boats are around, or maybe you're out of veggies, but you just know like 100 miles from the next little village that might sell veggies. So that, you know, that's all part of that too. It's not all rosy and colorful. And I think it's really important for me in this conversation to show this start. Yes, there's amazing parts to different lives, and there's hard parts. I guess there's hard parts to any life, no? But what I often, if people ask me to sum it up, I say the highs are higher and the lows are lower. I think that really nails it.
That's great. And that's good. That's a good reminder for us, you know, who haven't gone through it, is to remember, like you said, it's not all roses, but there are all these practical things that you have to think about that are things that we take for granted. And I'm also curious, so when you're talking about when you know it's time to move on, it's just a feeling a lot of times. I mean, of course, you have to take into account other factors, like you mentioned. But now that you have kids and your kids are getting older, how much input do they have? Because that's something I've talked to with other people who have traveled with teens or preteens. And, you know, as their kids get older, they try to involve them a little more in the process, but sometimes that can be kind of a balance. So when you're talking about a group of people, what if some of you are ready to move on and the others want to stay? How do you negotiate all of those kind of emotions?
The kids are boss. Like the older they grew, so they were 6, 10, and 11 now.
Mm.
And if they were happy, we are happy. So they take a huge say in where we go. And meeting up with other kids' boats, that kind of thing influences a lot where we go these days. At the beginning, it was different. 10 years ago, when we first moved onto the boat, because they were tiny, so I had a toddler and a baby then. And we also were fresh, so we just wanted to explore everything. We started in the Mediterranean, and I remember like racing from Greek. Now it seems like racing from Greek island to Greek island and explore another ruin and another little town, and it was amazing then. But now looking back at that rhythm we had, wow, how did we do it? So it's very different for every family, for every traveling person, couple, no? But for us at this point where we are, where the kids are kind of in this teen stage, yeah, for sure, they have to have a say, because if they're not happy, you're not going to have a good time. And on the other hand, if they're happy, even if you're in a place that's perhaps not on like the number one on your list, you still be happy.
Well, can you talk some more about that, about how it's different traveling with very small children versus with older children? Because I imagine that's changed a lot. I mean, one, you've become more experienced also, but also just how that dynamic changes as they get older.
Yeah, there's certain things that are easier and certain things that are harder. No, the easier ones, when they're little, you basically, I remember strapping them on, one in the front, one in the back, or if my hubby was free, he'd take one, and off you go, doing what you do as long as you have enough snacks. It was pretty easy, and it was also in a way easier to entertain them. It wasn't so important yet having other kids boats around, and they're like 1, 2, 3, this early stage. They don't need that constantly as long as you're with them. If it was a long passage, you pulled a few art supplies out and they were busy and like they didn't know the vocabulary for "I'm bored." So the harder bit was you knew that if they fell in the water, that would be it. So there was a constant level of like I'd never 100% relaxed, because although they had a certain respect, they learned to swim super early. It's still it's a real danger that exists when you're living on a boat. No, and I guess for people who more land traveling, doing some of the things. It's kids running away, kids running onto the road or running off into the jungle. So there's just that kind of more difficulty. And as they grow older, it's easier in some ways because you can talk with them, you can reason with them, you can argue with them, whatever comes up. No? It's more, the harder bit is more the emotional balance. A little bit what we were talking before, making sure that all their cups are filled. One really needs friends around a lot. The other one, there's just different needs that you need to consider on. The more they grow into their own little strong personality, the more you need to balance it. And being a family of five, like there's a lot of different interests at times, and so it's balancing them all out. But on the other hand, I know when they fall in the water, they just swim back to the boat. So they kind of know, and they're more helpful. They actually, they in some ways, like one is really into the sailing bit, and he helps me repair all the electrics on the boat. It used to be me teaching him, and then we used to for a while do it together, and now I basically hand him the tools and he's like the lead. Or little things. I do the dishes, but they've been helpful in that sense. So there's not an answer, and it's easier when they're younger, it's easier when they're older. What we do say in the cruising community, and again, I imagine for land-based travel, it would be a similar saying, is that golden age is kind of between 4 and 12, because they're old enough to really soak it in and capture it, and still want to spend time with the family, and young enough to not need all that teenage, just wanting to be away from family and just have their own teenage friends all the time and a bit more space.
Yeah, I have 3 kids, and it sounds like they're about the same age as yours. So I'm just imagining that it is a nice age. I mean, we've never done sailing with them, but we've done some traveling, and like you said, they're old enough that you're not carrying them. They can walk by themselves, but that, like you said, young enough, they still want to spend time with you. They can help out more. So that does sound pretty ideal. And although I imagine it is difficult, just thinking about my kids and their different personalities and needs and interests, that's always kind of a struggle, to try and balance all of those. So I can imagine that. And that also makes me think about schooling. Now that they're older, you have to worry about that. We're not worried about it, but then you have to think about, and I think I saw you were world schooling. So maybe you could tell people exactly what that means. And then I know there's so much variety in how people do it. So I'm just curious, what does that look like for your family?
Yeah, you said it very well. I can't really tell you what that means, because it means something different for every family, as you said very correctly. For us, so maybe I'll tell you about the range first, and then I'll tell you where we fit in, somewhere in the middle. There is the ones that completely free school or unschool or whatever word you want to use. So basically there's nothing guided, and you just trust in that inner instinct that humans in fact, want to learn. And so if the kid shows an interest, you guide them there, but there's nothing like workbooks or encouraging them even to read or write. It's just you wait till it comes, or if it comes. And then on the other hand of the spectrum is the ones that follow a very strict curriculum. Some are US based, some are UK, Australian curriculums, all sorts of French, of course. I say of course because they're a great sailor nation. And then you have, weekly or monthly things you send in. Sometimes there's even online classes where kids log on. So that's the other side of the spectrum. We are somewhere in the middle, where I'm roughly guided by the Australian curriculum. It's just one day we decide to go back home, that I know they can kind of slide back in, is keeping that door open. And also because I'm not a teacher, so it's good to every few months I go back and look at the curriculum, like, do we roughly tick the boxes? And most of the time we do, and then if there's something that we don't, then I kind of try and bring it up. So I try and spend an average of 2 hours with them every morning after breakfast, so 9 to 11 roughly. That's our homeschool time, and just try and get the basics covered: maths, grammar, and they're bilingual, so we do Spanish and English. And I do bring in history because I love it, and every now and then I get tired of grammar. But that way, also, apart from, personally, I just think it's important, or it feels important, that they have that basic covered, to keep the doors open to all worlds, because maybe one of them will, decide to be an investment banker and just needs all that. I don't want to force them to be like the nomadic hippie that I turned out to be, no? But then I feel they almost learn more, or they probably learn more, not almost, they learn more just through this way of living. And sometimes it's very subtle, or just impressions they take in. And sometimes, like I mentioned before, the example with my oldest helping me with the electric problems on the boat is very applied. There's just so much input in the world around you when there's space for them to ask the questions. That would be a very unschool comment to make, I guess, but it's kind of present because yesterday I talked to a friend back home and I love her to bits, and we're also so different. She's basically, her kids get up at 5 in the morning and until 8 p.m. there's a schedule, and it's been like that for years. And activity after activity in between school and before school, and so the very opposite. And I see my kids, because I don't have that at all. There's a lot of space for them to just be. It's in those moments where perhaps sometimes I go, I'm bored. I think it's important for them to be bored, because then they start wondering, and you see the creativity start sprouting, and all of a sudden they start making up a game, or they grab their snorkel stuff and go off. And I think it's, I haven't I researched it a little bit, but it's more a gut feeling that it's an important piece to solving many of the world's issues. Just have more space to wonder. Maybe not even just for kids. Look at the world, so much depression and so much. We really have so much, and yet so many people. And in my work is like yoga. I lead yoga and tantra retreats and teacher trainings. Like, I come across that people have everything really on the material scale, and yet so many of us feel empty and lonely and lost. And yeah, I wonder if it's got to do with just having too much on and too little space to really connect, whether it's with self or with friends or with nature. I feel I went off on a rant a bit.
No, that's such a great transition, because I wanted to talk about your work, and it really ties in. I mean, it all kind of fits together, doesn't it? Because you're providing kind of the same kind of space for your kids that you're trying to do with your clients, because it does. I agree. I mean, here in the US, I feel like there is a lot of kids that are overscheduled. I mean, I don't want to judge. Every family's different. Kids' needs are different. Maybe there are kids that kind of need that structure. But I know for our family, we really need that downtime. Like you said, like time for them to get bored and be creative, and also, like you said, just to kind of be, and to be mindful and to be aware of where, kind of where they are, and not just go, go, go. Because I feel like as adults, that's how we are a lot of times. And so we just kind of perpetuate that with our kids, which leads right into your work. Because I do want to talk about that, because I think, like you said, it all kind of fits together with what you're doing with your kids. And it's also kind of interesting, I think, for people to know how you make a living when you're traveling, because that's often the big piece. Like, yes, that does sound great, but how would I actually make that work? How would I make money and be able to, how would we sustain ourselves?
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it? Again, I'll tell you my answer, or how we roll, and also knowing that there's such a huge spectrum and people make it happen in all different ways. And I believe if you really want to make something happen, you make it happen. And I've seen in the sailing community, just in my little world, so many, like, of course, there's no level, there's no limit to the budget, but I've seen people with barely a penny, and if they want to make it happen, they make it happen. So it's an excuse if you say that finances are not happening, but it's an important factor. That is true. So I'm going to address it. There's those who save up for several years and then kind of take a sabbatical. It might be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. More often than not, they take 2 years and it turns to 4 years. Some take 4 years, and after half a year, they quit, because it's actually not like the YouTube channels portray it. The highs are higher, yes, but the lows are lower. I just think sailing with your sailing friends of ours just joined. It's nice to see them. I'm sure they would have a few things to say about that too. Then there is the ones like us who work on the way. And I think since COVID, there is actually more of that, because the whole online working market has just become a lot more acceptable. And I know for us, since then, it's become so, well, my husband is the one who mainly works online. He's a data analyst. So he's got his own clients, works as a consultant. And yeah, since COVID, it's definitely been so much easier for him to work this way. And there's changes in technology that now allows to have internet via satellite. So that was a big issue. You know, if you do work online, you kind of need internet. And perhaps when you're planning a trip, that's not something you think about.
I was
But all of a
actually
sudden you're out there.
wondering about that.
Oh.
How do you access the is it just when you pull into a place? I mean, obviously, I would imagine when you're actually sailing from one place to the other, you don't have internet, or how does that work?
Well, that was the case until very, very recently, as in like a few months ago. And yeah, 10 years ago, we'd be in the middle of nowhere in the Greece and pulling the phone booster up the mast to try and get a little bit of reception. And now, thanks to, bless him, Elon Musk, who is just revolutionizing so many things. Now people love him, people hate him. I think he's a genius, not perfect, but a genius in many, many ways. And for our little life, he's made things so much easier because he's come up with a Starlink. I don't know if it's people know or heard about that, but basically before it was like that. You just, if you're sailing between places, there's no internet. There's always, or it has been satellite communication for a long time, but it was so incredibly expensive that mostly it was just used for emergency purposes. And now he's come up with this very affordable way. There's a little dish you put up somewhere on your boat, and you can have excellent internet anywhere in this world, which is a game changer for people working online. And like I said, it's more and more possible to do online. So that's my husband. He does that. And I run yoga, tantra retreats, teacher trainings in places we go to or we want to go to. And that all grew with me very organically. When we first started sailing in the Med, like in the winter, we'd stop. We spent 2 winters in Malta, winter in the UK. Seems like a long time ago now. And I'd start teaching yoga classes locally, and once we'd leave again, people would go, but we want to come, we want to keep doing yoga with you. And I'd say, well, I'd be in Crete in 2 months, and they'd come, and that's how it started, and it's still going. So yeah, I've got a retreat in Guatemala coming up in June, some yoga, breath and meditation, and a yoga teacher training here in Panama in September for 3 weeks in Bocas del Toro. And that's how we make it happen. Yeah.
So it sounds like you have some people that kind of follow you wherever you're going. They love working with you. Like you said, the people that wanted to meet you in Crete later and go to a yoga retreat. So do you have a lot of people that kind of just show up wherever you happen to be? They say, okay, we'll be there. If you're in Guatemala, I'll be, or is it a lot of new people? Like, is it mostly like through social media? How do you get the word out about it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixture of everything you said. So there's the ones that have known me for a long, long time, and they mainly in the Mediterranean and back home in Australia. So here it's been 2 years when we've been in the Caribbean. I'm still kind of finding my feet in that sense. So it's been a bit of that, just organically. I don't have time nor want to spend much time on the screen. So yes, I put things out on my website for sure, and Facebook and Instagram, but I don't follow. Probably any marketing expert would look at what I'm doing and go, oh my God, that's shocking. How does he make it even happen? It's people I meet on the way, actually, sometimes, like random encounters. It's friends of friends. It's, yes, you get the occasional person maybe who sees this Instagram live, who's curious and gets in touch. It's also some collaborations. That's actually something I've been inviting in more. Because running retreats alone is beautiful in many ways because you can really tailor it how you want it. But running retreats, if you've got the right partner or partners, is also an amazing thing. So I've been inviting that more and starting to see it come to fruition, whether it's collaborations with retreat centers. So Selena's is the one in Bocas where I'm running my teacher training with them. I've been working for a little while now, which is really nice when you know the team and you feel like you're part of a team. Because it can be lonely. That's another thing maybe if you can talk about traveling. It's amazing. You meet lots of new people, lots of new friends, and sometimes there's no one around. And sometimes when you need someone, there's no one around. But yeah, I think that answers does it answer the question of the income?
Yeah, definitely. And also I think it helps people kind of get a sense of what it's like to be there, like you said, about it sounds like among the sailing community, I don't know if that's the right way to say it. It sounds like there is kind of a community where you meet people, and I imagine you might run into them again if you're all kind of have a similar lifestyle, but at the same time, you're all kind of doing your own thing. So, like you said, all these incredible connections, and yet sometimes I imagine that would be pretty lonely. But I don't know. This is so great to talk to you because I think you point out a lot of the pros and cons and things that people may not have actually thought about
Mm.
if they're going to do it. But it still sounds like a really amazing lifestyle, especially so many benefits for the kids and the family. So thank you for sharing with us. And if you're interested in the retreats, be sure to visit. I'm sure you have like the link to your website and your bio, and we are also going to put up the links to those retreats that are coming up. That's in Guatemala in June, and then the teacher training in Panama. When we post this on YouTube, I'll be sure to include the links to those as well, so you can go and sign up. That I would love to do one of those retreats. It sounds beautiful. So thank you for joining us. It's so great talking with you.
Thank you. I feel we could talk another three
I
hours, but
I was
maybe
just
for another one.
definitely. We'll have to do another one. And who knows where you'll be joining us from then. And so if you're joining us late, this will be up on Instagram in just a few minutes, and then we will have it up on YouTube later. Thank you, Dini.
Thank
Bye.
you. Have a beautiful rest of the day. Bye bye.